I'm Chris Bisha, editor-in-chief of 360degreesound.com. South by Southwest 2026 is set to kick off March 12th in Austin, Texas, and we're excited to spotlight some of the outstanding artists performing at the festival this year. Right now, I have the pleasure of a chat with Gwenno Saunders, more widely known simply as Gwenno. She's a Welsh singer, songwriter, and producer, and Gwenno is truly a Renaissance artist. She's been an actor, a radio and TV presenter, and a dancer. She's toured with the likes of Elton John as a synth player, and she was part of the retro girl group, the Pipettes, in the mid-naughties. She's an advocate for Welsh independence and was made a Bard of the Cornish Gorsedd in 2019 for services to the Cornish language through music and media. She's released 4 solo albums. Her latest, Utopia, came out in 2025, and it's packed with atmospheric pop songs that flirt openly with the psychedelic. It's truly a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to speak with you, Gwenno. Thanks a lot for joining me.
Oh, thanks for the intro. That was lovely. Thank you.
Yes. What do you think is important for new listeners to know about your origin story?
Whoa. I think, gosh, that's a good question. Origin stories are interesting, aren't they? I sort of really admire people who create a mythology around them, and make stuff up. And perhaps I should have made more stuff up. But I think it's chaotic enough. But perhaps it makes less sense because actually I think real life is very chaotic and a little bit messy, which is certainly my path in a way. It's been very varied, but I've been very curious.
Your songs and your art really reflect the places that you've lived and grown up and the languages that you speak. And so on that tip, Utopia is your first primarily English language song cycle. You've written almost exclusively in Welsh and Cornish previously, right? So
Hmm.
what inspired the choice this time?
I think I left home when I was 16, and I joined a dance show called Lord of the Dance because I was an Irish dancer, competitive Irish dancer. This was a very long time ago. It's a quarter of a century ago. And my life then became very English language, even though I was around the Irish. And I lived in North America. I lived in Las Vegas, and I worked at one of the hotels there when I was 17. So I realized the impact that the English language had also had on me. And my thing is always about the relationship between languages, and particularly in Britain, it's about how those identities feed into each other, how they live in tandem, how they talk to each other. And I just felt it was right. I'd been singing exclusively in Welsh and Cornish for 10 years. Before that, I was in the Pipettes, which was just an English indie pop band. So I kind of felt like I was ready to bring it back in because it was reflecting perhaps another part of my life. And I just think as an artist, whichever medium you're in, I think you've just got to use all the tools in the box. And I just felt like I was ready to pull it in because it's like English is just a ginormous language. And I think that that's what I sort of wanted to make it fit into my view of the world. And I wanted to give my other languages, which are less widely spoken, the chance to sort of come up. It's sort of like it's like this, and then you can bring the English language back in, and it's all on the same level rather than dominant. So yeah, it just felt right. I just kind of wanted to explore it again. I was curious.
I read where it was said of Utopia that captures a time of self-determination and experimentation. Uh, I read these songs are songs of discovery of the years between being someone's daughter and becoming someone's wife and someone's mother. I found that very interesting comment.
Yeah, I think it is about self-discovery, and I think I think it was just a process that I wanted to go through and I needed to go through. And it was cathartic to remember all the people I tried to be over the past 25 years. And I was just thinking a lot about how quickly this quarter of a century has gone. I'm an 80s kid, so like I remember the last century, I remember the physical world. And I just wanted to sort of document what I'd seen before everything changes, because I do feel like we're at this really crucial point where it really feels like everything is going to change quite dramatically, and it's just a postcard, really.
Yeah.
And I was sort of I was in reflective mode. I just had my second baby, so
Uh,
I was just
Congratulations.
sort of, thank you. But I was just sort of, it's sort of a real like, oh, here I am thinking about writing a book, but I write a record.
Yeah.
Um, and it was good. And it also prompted me to go back to Las Vegas. I went back there and filmed with this wonderful cinematographer called Claire Marie Bailey. And that was great, because I think, again, when we're outside of the US, our relationship to it is such a dominant entity
Mm.
in everyone's lives, culturally, economically. And I was raised in a very Celtic household that actually completely ignored North America. And I was sort of curious to go back to that again and see what influence it had had on me. And that was okay. And it was actually quite fun and pure. Yeah, it was just nice to reconnect and also wanting to transfer how I feel about people and place to somewhere that I think, particularly with Las Vegas, that it gets very dismissed as a place at all because of how people feel about it. And I'm always curious when places are a bit of an underdog because and I lived there, I lived and worked alongside people who, work in hotels and casinos, and it's
Hmm.
a very working class town. And that's my vibe. I just love people and I love people,
Hmm.
just everyone's got a story and I'm just interested in that.
It sounds like Utopia is almost like a memoir, uh, as a
Yeah,
recording.
definitely. And just thinking back about Vegas as well, I loved the contradiction and the contrast between the records that I made before, which were
Mm.
about land and earth and sea and
There was
rock
none of
and
that in Las Vegas.
no, and it was like I really sort of liked applying those ideas to somewhere that hotels just get knocked down all the time, and it's
Hmm.
like what do we create as people, and how disposable and how interchangeable that is, and how fleeting it is, and the whole record's really about that because I've felt that a lot this century, is that everything feels so much more disposable than it did in the last century, and it's
Hmm.
just everything you can throw away after one use. And it's the same with people, it's the same with culture, it's the same with everything. It's just like, and I felt like Vegas was such a great, epitomized that for me.
How was this different from previous projects that you've worked on?
Well, I think because I've written everything on the piano, I've been an electronic producer predominantly up until this point. But I was curious to go back to the piano again. I love the piano as an instrument. It's my first instrument. There's a purity to the musicality of it that I engage with when I play. And I was thinking a lot about ballads, and they're all like stories about different cities, Brighton and Cardiff and London, just places I've had experiences in. Um, and that encouraged me then to think about perhaps putting the record together differently, because normally it would start with me creating demos that come from electronic music, which sort of evolve into songs. Um, and I have a band, and we've been playing for a long time, and so we always make our records in the living room right here. But we got the band in, so we had Llyr Parry on drums and Tad Davis on bass as well, and then I was on piano, and then Rhys was on piano sometimes, and yeah, it was just sort of more of a collective recording situation, still very lo-fi, and I think we always try and make these like massive Hollywood records with like no budget in our living room with no equipment. But I think we're sort of thinking about doing things quite differently next time. But that's kind of, it was sort of the culmination of all of that thinking, and quite sort of cinematic in production and ambition. So it was slightly different because normally, I'm particularly the record before, because it was during the pandemic, it was just Rhys and I, so it was pulling people in. Um, so yeah, it was. I mean, it was a nice way of exploring. I think it's really important every time you make a record to try and make it differently, and you learn so much every time you do. So it was a learning curve. I think it. I mean, it was a massive learning curve. So we've really learned in terms of time scale and things like that.
Great. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it like I said, it's a great listen. I love this cycle of songs. Let's talk about a couple of them.
Hmm.
So Dancing on Volcanoes was the lead single from Utopia, and I love the image that I got that we're living our lives never knowing when an eruption might happen. So
Hmm.
there's trauma, but we can make the choice to just keep dancing. I love that.
And I think the sort of live like ignorance is bliss, just knowing there's these seismic shifts happening. And then interestingly, I just came up with that phrase, dancing on volcanoes. And then I did some Google research and I noticed that the last, what was he? He was like the last finance minister of the Weimar Republic said before Hitler came in, he said, "We are dancing on the edge of a volcano." So I was like, it was a really interesting parallel between what I sort of wanted to express and the fact that that had happened at that point in history almost a century ago at not a dissimilar tipping point. So yeah, it was there's a lot of layers to it, and getting older and again, I mean, my whole career has had a thread of dance involved,
Yeah.
from the very, very beginning. Um, and I'm such a believer in the power of dancing in any form for us as in our well-being. So it was just another chance to sing about dancing.
I love the trippy vibe of Utopia of the title track, but I do take issue in the video. You seem to be equating Las Vegas with Utopia.
Yeah,
Is
but
that
the thing
ironic?
is, yeah, there's a sort of contradiction there, but also the reason I called the record Utopia because originally I was going to call the record "Were We Ever Really Here," which I felt was a little bit of a mouthful, although I'm still unsure whether that was a good title. But I used to go to a nightclub in Las Vegas, a techno nightclub called Utopia, which is partly what that song is about. It's a sort of deep, sort of ode to sort of being a teenager and all of that, those dreams that you have with your friends. But also, the Utopia in its original Greek means non-place. And it has changed its meaning over time, but that's actually the original. Utopia spelt utopia because I think the ideal place is utopia, so it's utopia, but it's slightly different. And so I really liked that there was this quite generic name, and the fact that it meant non-place, which I think Vegas is. It's a non-place.
So the song War is particularly poignant right now with the resurgence of authoritarianism that we're experiencing, in all parts of the world, it seems. And some lyrics really struck me. One was "Who came of age to die?"
Mm,
And
yeah. Yeah, well, it's a poem written by an artist called Adrika Hughes who lived in Wales, and she was a patchwork quilt artist, but really radical. It looked like paintings,
mm,
and did really well in her 90s actually. But she was also a poet, and she wrote this just at the turn of the Second World War, and it's a poem that I've been singing since 2018. And every time I sing it, it just feels more relevant. And that's why I included it on the record because there was something as well about her words, which I think politics in music is a really flexible thing, an expansive thing. I think I'm influenced by political singers certainly as a child because I grew up. That's what I grew up around.
mhm,
Um, but what I liked about Adrika's words was the nuance and the calmness in her tone, which
mm,
I think there's a lot of room for in all art forms at the moment. I think that giving us time to contemplate things without telling us what to think
mhm.
is a really, really useful tool. And so I've just found Adrika's poem very, very, very useful, which is why I wanted to include it on the record because it's been very useful for me to think about how I feel about what's going on around me and what my contribution to and what my responsibility is to that.
Mhm.
And I just feel like her words are relevant to so many areas as well. I find them so flexible. Every
Mhm.
time I sing them, it feels like, oh yeah, this is about this moment and this moment, and really, it's so much about how powerless we can be and feel um, in our lives. But having that said, does empower you. We can also be very simple creatures in the sense that we just want a roof over our heads and being able to feed our families and being able
Yeah.
to be around them safely. That's all human
Yeah.
rights is about. So yeah, I just felt like her, and particularly from that English perspective as well. I just thought it just spoke to me, and that's why I wanted to include it. And it was great because it's probably the most electronic song on the record, and
Mhm.
she responded with guitar, and the band responded with guitar. And I just think that they did such a wonderful job of responding to like the original, basically the key of D minor, which I love.
It's lovely that that you essentially put this poem to music, correct?
Yeah, exactly what I've done, which I
Yeah.
like doing because I did that on my second record. There was a poem um, by I love telling this story. So there's he was a scholar called Georg Sauerwein who was from Germany and spoke 75 languages. It's like, how do
Wow.
you do that? I have
I
no
know.
idea. But he was a tutor to like a lot of rich families around Europe, and he spoke Cornish. And he realised that no one has written anything down in the Cornish language for a century because it was
Mm.
gradually dying out post Reformation here. And so he wrote a poem to his friends, which I set to music, and I sort of created a song out of it and added another couple of verses and a chorus. But it was just, it was just this simple gesture of a poem
Mhm.
that means that I speak Cornish now, and the Cornish language is growing and thriving. And if had he not, there wouldn't have been anything. He's like the small link between the past and the future, and that was in the 18th century.
How do you approach your remixes?
Um, People, it's friends and people I admire, and I love remixing other artists as well. It's such a great way of sort of getting to know someone else's track. It's almost like jamming, but like virtually. I always find there's always something to discover, and it's always nice to think, oh yeah, this is the bit that this is the great part about this song, and so you get sort of a real control over rearranging what the song's about. But the Utopia remix was great because it's a Cornelius remix, who's such a fantastic artist from Japan that was
Yeah.
really such a big influence on all of us really in the noughties. And this record was about that time, and so I was really honoured that he did remix it, and he sort of made it even more musical. And I was like, there's a lot of chords in that original song, and he managed to stuff more in there, being the genius that he is. And it was great because we played in Japan and we got to meet him, and he's as fantastic as you can imagine. Um, so it's really great to hear what other people see and hear in your own songs. I think it's fun. It's almost like covering a song in a way. It's like that old tradition of covering other people's songs.
A different way of interpreting another artist's work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's cool how it's evolved into a true art form of its
yeah.
own, remixing.
Totally. I do see it that. I mean, I see it like Joan Baez covering Bob Dylan. It's that kind of right. I'm going to take your song and I'm going to turn it into something else. It's a similar thought process, I think.
You've got a couple of official South by Southwest appearances on Sunday, March 15th. That's the Focus Wales showcase at
Hmm.
Swan Dive. And
Yeah,
then you'll also be performing Thursday, the opening night, with the British Music Embassy, which is also, that's a good time. British
yeah.
Music Embassy is always one of our favorites.
Oh, great. Well, I'm excited. I'm going to do something slightly different, and which I've been working on. And I don't know, I sort of, South by such a party, and I'm
Yes.
really excited about that because I was going to come over and like do a quiet piano set, which is what I've been doing. I was like, that's not going to work, like
Yeah.
I'm
Can
not
you
carrying.
tease? Can you tease a little bit of what you got
Well,
planned?
I mean, it's going to just be a little bit more energetic, I think. I'm definitely standing up.
Okay.
Um, um, yeah, because I think I'm doing an in-store which hasn't been announced yet on Saturday afternoon. So I will do a piano set. So that'll be my only piano set that I do unless I jump on someone's piano at some point when I'm drunk or
Okay.
something.
So if you're going to South by, definitely check out Gwenno because she's got something up her sleeve, apparently. And
Yeah,
you're not going to want to miss that. And
no.
enjoy her tunes on Spotify and Bandcamp and YouTube in any case. So for now, I'm Chris of 360 Degree Sound. Thanks to everyone out there for listening to music from all angles. And thanks a lot for this, Gwenno. I've really enjoyed meeting you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Chris. It's been great.